And now, the general weather around Alaska. Welcome to Alaska Weather. I'm meteorologist Peter Chan coming to you from the National Weather Service on this Thursday, August 10th, 2023. And if you would like additional weather information on top of what I provide in this YouTube broadcast, you can go to weather.gov. That is the National Weather Service's online presence. And we've had a major national story here over the past day and a half. That is the devastating wildfires on Hawaii. The area of Maui, especially hard hit, the town of Lahaina, completely destroyed with over 36 fatalities and many, many more people still missing. The rest of the country, the heat continues. We have either heat advisories or excessive heat warnings across the south from Florida on up into Oklahoma, Arkansas, southeast Kansas, and much of Texas. Severe thunderstorm watch in eastern South Dakota. And this certainly, summer rolls on in those areas. Here in Alaska, we continue to have red flag warnings in effect for central and eastern portions of the interior until 10 p.m. this Thursday evening. Also, dense smoke is impacting many areas of the interior, which is impacting general aviation and public health due to poor air quality and poor visibility. And we're monitoring a strong weekend storm that'll be coming together, moving up into the Gulf, and that'll impact the Gulf Coast and Panhandle with some gale force winds and locally heavy rainfall in some areas of over 3 inches. Looking at some of the webcams this afternoon, up there in Bettles, wildfire smoke, 73 degrees. You can see visibilities there have been down around 1.5 miles to 1 mile. And that's certainly impacting visibility, especially for aviation and the air quality, for just poor air quality for public health. Juno, skies are overcast, 57 degrees in the recovery phase from the Mendenhall River flood as the result of the Suicide Basin Mendenhall Glacier release that happened this past weekend on Saturday night. And we're concerned about some of the rain coming in there and some gusty winds because of the bank of the river has been destabilized by the high floodwaters that have since receded. And at this point, with some heavier rain falling on top of that, we don't expect any repeat of a flood of that magnitude, but it could impact some of the trees and things there along the river's edge that may have been weakened from the epic weekend flood. But looking at what we have currently in effect for advisories, warnings, watches, red flag warnings, Tanana on up through Fairbanks, Fort Yukon, as well as dense smoke advisories for these areas. And the main fire weather threat has to do with scattered thunderstorms and lightning strikes that could cause new fires. And then off to the southeast, this is just to highlight a special weather statement. We anticipate a low to move up into the western Gulf over the weekend, especially Saturday. Frontal system working its way into the northern, northeastern Gulf and in Panhandle will bring strong gusty winds and some heavier rainfall. Looking at the fire danger today and forecast for tomorrow, we anticipate fire danger to be highest along the Brooks Range and in through the Yukon Flats. And that's for the grass component. For spruce component, we have very high fire danger there just to the southeast of the Brooks Range, especially through the Yukon Flats. The latest information that we get from the Alaska Interagency Coordination Center. And they talk about easterly waves bringing chances of some scattered showers and thunderstorms across the interior that could spark some additional fires. And those thunderstorms are going to kind of pull back more toward the southwest mainland here as we head into Saturday. We have a lot of smoke across the interior that is impacting not just general aviation, but the ability for air attack on those fires and poor air quality. Winds this weekend could pick up again along certain areas of the Alaska Range as that low comes up into the Gulf and we have high pressure way up in the Arctic Ocean. That tightens the pressure gradient across the mainland. So that could cause some gustier winds through some of the gaps and areas. So that could enhance fire danger as well this weekend along and especially north of the Alaska Range. And at this point, we do not see any widespread rains that would wet and end the fire season. So we expect only spotty precipitation, especially in these interior areas. So if anything, the fire season is just going to gradually taper off. So we still have some fire activity to deal with here for the next couple of weeks at least, but probably a trend slowly downward. Now, looking at the precipitation forecast with that Gulf Coast storm here Saturday, some areas along the eastern Kenai, west side of Prince William Sound, the coastal mountains there, Cordova, down on over toward Yakutat, in through the Panhandle. Some rainfall amounts on the order of 2 to 3 inches, where you have the enhancement from the moisture being lifted up over that higher terrain. And then by Sunday, we expect rain amounts of on the order of another 1 or 2 inches in some of the coastal mountains. So here are the winds Saturday morning. We have gale force winds with storm force gust possible here in the northwestern Gulf, especially just off of Kodiak Island and off of the Kenai Peninsula. That's early Saturday morning. By the time we get into Saturday afternoon, the low center will be located just east of Kodiak in the western Gulf, with strong winds, gusty winds extending along frontal band that'll be pushing up in through the Panhandle and areas of the north central Gulf Coast. So at the very least, expect gale warnings along these areas. At the very least, small craft advisories for the inner channels there of the Panhandles. Stay tuned to later forecasts, because this is a pretty strong system for this point in the summer. And looking at satellite imagery this afternoon, we still have a weaker area of low pressure in the western Gulf. Another low that's just kind of sitting and spinning here in the central bearing. These are the clouds associated with the next disturbance south of here, outside of the view of your screen. That is the energy that's going to ride northeastward and then up into the western Gulf by Saturday. And current satellite image with the fronts and various pressure systems laid on top. We have the weak low in the western Gulf. The other one sitting back out here in the central bearing, a high pressure way up here off of the Russian Arctic coast, way up there in the Arctic Ocean. And then thermal troughs that continue here along the interior, which serve as a focus for scattered showers and thunderstorms. Now, later tonight, we still have that weak low in the western Gulf, but here's the hints of that next low coming up out of the North Pacific. That'll become the main weather player here going into the early weekend. By Friday afternoon, we expect that low, a 980 low, to be south of the Alaska Peninsula, with a warm front extending out into the North Pacific and beginning to approach the Gulf. Meanwhile, still thermal troughs of low pressure back here through the interior, which will serve as a focus for some thunderstorms. This area here, shaded in the tan, is where we expect isolated to scattered thunderstorms to be possible from areas south slopes of the Brooks Range down along the middle Yukon River back toward Yukon Flats, highlands up there, the 40-mile gold country, back to the west side of the Alaska Range into the southwest interior, including areas of the Kuskokwim River Basin. And then Saturday afternoon, we have this 981 low just east of Kodiak, occluded front arcing ahead of it up through the north central Gulf, and then the front pushing in through the Panhandle. And along this front, there will be strong winds gusting to at least gale force, and we can expect some periods of moderate to heavier rain, especially in through the coastal mountains, where you get that added lift due to the terrain. And on Saturday, we expect the threat of thunderstorms to pull back across the southwest interior, east side of Norton Sound, down along the lower Yukon Basin, and also up through the middle upper Kuskokwim River Basin could catch an isolated to scattered thunderstorms. Friday morning lows will generally be in the 40s and 50s statewide. Coolest temperatures along the north slope, Arctic coast. Pockets of cooler temperatures, such as Gulkana in the Copper River Basin. And then cooler out along the Alaska Peninsula and the Aleutians, upper 40s to near 50 for lows. Highs Friday afternoon will still be quite warm on the south side of the Brooks Range, 70s. An isolated 80-degree reading, kind of tough just because of all of the smoke. The smoke is actually holding down temperatures by several degrees. We see temperatures only near 60 along the Gulf Coast and in the low mid-60s in the Panhandle. Saturday morning lows, again, generally 40s or 50s. Coolest readings north slope and Arctic coast. Pockets of some 40s here in through south central, and warmest readings along the Yukon River, mid-upper 50s possible, even there just east of Norton Sound, up around Ambler and places like Galena, Ruby. Temperatures on Saturday, a little warmer air pushing back out toward the Seward Peninsula, perhaps 67 there at Nome, 70 at Kotzebue. We find With the cloud cover and rain pushing up in stronger winds, will keep temperatures mainly in the 60s, south central, upper 50s to lower 60s along the Gulf Coast. And the extended temperature outlook that we're anticipating here, once we just get past mid-month, August 16th through the 20th, temperatures are forecast to average a bit above normal, perhaps along the North Slope, eastern parts of the mainland along the Alcan border, and then down through the Panhandle. Near normal temperatures, south central up through the middle Yukon Valley back toward Kotzebue, and then maybe a little below normal here, again over the southwest, Bethel, Dillingham, Kodiak back toward the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutians. Precipitation-wise, perhaps a little below normal here across the southwest. Doesn't mean you're not going to see precipitation, just not as much as what you might normally get here as we go through the middle part of August. A little below normal in through the Panhandle, around average southern half of the mainland, and a bit above normal perhaps along the western Brooks Range, North Slope, and along the Arctic coast.